My name is Carol Davis, and I am 27 years old. To outsiders, my life looks like a fairy tale. The daughter of Robert Davis, a titan of Boston's real estate world, raised in a mansion by the Atlantic with privileges most people never touch in their wildest dreams. But inside those marble walls, the air has always been heavy. My childhood was more gilded cage than paradise. Since my mother's death 5 years ago, the cage has only tightened. Elizabeth Davis, graceful, warm, endlessly patient, was the only one who could soften my father's sharp edges. She was my advocate, my refuge. When ovarian cancer took her within 8 cruel months, Robert buried himself in work, and I was left standing alone in his shadow. The house, though beautiful, became suffocating, every room echoing with silence and control. Robert Davis is 58 now, his reputation carved from discipline and intimidation. Salt and pepper hair, always combed into perfect order, custom suits, sharper than his gaze. In the boardrooms of Boston, he commands respect, sometimes even fear. He donates to charities, shakes hands with governors, and has his name engraved on hospital wings. Yet at home, he rules with iron disguised as love teaching through what he calls hardship lessons that often feel like punishments. When I was 16, he left me stranded at a ski resort with no phone or money because I'd missed curfew. At 20, after I questioned a business decision at dinner, he canceled my credit cards, forcing me to survive 3 months on savings. Each humiliation carried the same refrain: "This will make you stronger." He never considered that strength might also come from kindness. Despite it all, some part of me still craves his approval. I went to Harvard, graduated in finance, took my assigned role at Davis Enterprises. I should have studied environmental law, my dream, but Robert dismissed it as impractical sentimental. So I play the dutiful daughter, working twice as hard as anyone else, forever chasing his nod of acceptance. It is exhausting. Our 7-bedroom estate sits on 5 manicured acres with a tennis court, a pool, and views that look like postcards. Guests marvel at the grandeur, but they can't sense the tension seeping through the walls. The chandeliers glisten, the polished floors echo with our footsteps, but what fills the house is not laughter. It is expectation scrutiny and the sharp silence after every conversation with my father. There is one secret my father doesn't know: Alex Mercer. He has been watching over me for years, though not in the way my father would approve. Uncle James, my mother's brother, arranged it before he passed away from a sudden heart attack. James never trusted Robert after my mother died. He saw something in my father's eyes that worried him. Without my knowledge, he hired Alex, former Army Ranger, 35, dark hair, tall enough to look over a crowd and find me in an instant. At first, I resented the intrusion, a bodyguard I never asked for, lurking on the edges of my life, but over time I began to understand. Alex was never obtrusive. He blended into the background, quiet but steady like a shadow I could lean on if I fell. He wasn't just meant to protect me from outside dangers. James's instructions were clear: protect Carol from Robert's worst instincts too. Neither Alex nor I realized how prophetic that command would be. Boston's spring had always brought a sense of renewal, but for me it brought dread: the quarterly board meeting of Davis Enterprises. This wasn't just another meeting. It was my chance, maybe my only one, to prove to the board and to my father that I could bring something meaningful to the company. For weeks, I poured myself into preparation. Charts, projections, architectural sketches. I worked late into the night in my office, the city lights burning outside while I chased perfection inside. My vision was bold: Davis Green Developments, a division dedicated to environmentally sustainable buildings. It wasn't some sentimental indulgence. The data supported it. The market was shifting, demand for green buildings soaring. For once, I had something undeniable on my side numbers. The night before the meeting, I stood in front of my mirror, rehearsing my pitch. My navy suit was pressed, my notes memorized. But beneath the polished exterior, anxiety coiled in my stomach. I could already hear my father's voice dismissing me: idealistic, naive, unfit. Still, I had to try. If not now, when? That morning, sunlight poured through the glass walls of the 30th floor conference room, dazzling against polished mahogany. 12 board members settled into their leather chairs, murmuring greetings. My father presided at the head, his expression carved from stone. I rose hands steady, though my heart pounded, and began. Thank you for your time. Today I present Davis Green Developments. Slides illuminated the screen behind me. Market research client. Surveys projected profits. I spoke of carbon footprints, reduced costs, future-proof investments. To my relief, heads nodded. Janet Pierce, our CFO, scribbled notes. Thomas Blackwell leaned forward, intrigued. Even Walter Chen, usually indifferent, tapped his pen thoughtfully. For 20 minutes, the room seemed to tilt in my favor. I allowed myself a flicker of hope. Then the inevitable sound, my father's throat clearing. That is quite enough, Carol. He rose, addressing not me, but the board. While this presentation shows initiative, it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of our business model. Davis Enterprises does not pander to passing fads. We set trends. We do not chase them. His words sliced the air colder than the chill of the air conditioner. Heat flushed my face, but I steadied my voice. With respect, Father, this isn't a fad. The surveys are clear. 78% of clients would pay more for sustainable spaces. I advanced to the next slide, numbers glowing like lifelines. Numbers can be manipulated to say anything he said smoothly. What cannot be fabricated are decades of experience, something my daughter lacks. A murmur stirred among the board. Janet frowned. With respect, Robert, I've reviewed Carol's research. Her projections are conservative, if anything. This is worth exploring. Thomas nodded. The market is changing. A pilot project wouldn't dilute our brand. For the first time, Robert's jaw tightened. Being challenged was bad enough. Being challenged in support of me was intolerable. His knuckles whitened around his pen. Since when do we follow surveys and fashions? This is Davis Enterprises. If my daughter wishes to indulge in environmental causes, she should join a nonprofit. The silence that followed was deafening. My throat burned, but I swallowed the anger, refusing to let him see me crack. One thing was clear. Robert was not finished teaching me his version of lessons. And as he called me to his car that afternoon, insisting we visit a property I hadn't even mentioned in my plan, a knot of dread formed in my chest. Outside, the sky darkened, clouds heavy with rain. I didn't know it then, but the storm gathering over Boston would be nothing compared to the one my father was about to unleash on me. The meeting ended, not with a conclusion, but with a silence that seemed to weigh on my shoulders like lead. My proposal, weeks of research, endless late nights, was dismissed as a fad by the one man whose approval I had always chased. The board members filed out their sympathetic glances, cutting more deeply than their silence. Janet Pierce squeezed my arm as she passed. Don't lose heart, Carol. The numbers speak louder than he does. Her kindness only sharpened the ache. My father didn't even look at me as the last of them left. He simply gathered his papers with meticulous calm as though nothing of importance had transpired. When the door finally closed, we were alone, and the air felt suddenly thin. You will accompany me this afternoon, he said flatly, straightening his tie, to where I asked, already dreading the answer. The Westbrook site. If you insist on wasting my time with green nonsense, you might as well see the reality of what it takes to build. 2:00. Don't be late. I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand respect, to scream that my ideas were valid, but the steel in his eyes told me what defiance would cost. Yes, Father, I murmured, my voice steady, though my stomach twisted. 2 hours later, I found myself in the passenger seat of his black Mercedes, watching the skyline of Boston recede behind us. The air inside the car was thick, oppressive, broken only by the muted hum of the engine. My phone buzzed once in my bag. I glanced at the screen, a simple check-in message from Alex. Are you safe? I typed a quick reply, careful to angle the screen away from my father's eyes, boardroom over. Going with him now. Then I slid the phone back into my purse. Robert noticed. He always noticed. His jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Instead, his hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles pale against the black leather. The highway stretched ahead, lanes slick from a sudden drizzle. Dark clouds gathered heavy and low. I tried to distract myself by opening a work file on my laptop, but his voice broke the silence. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I shut the laptop slowly, my throat tightening. You mean the meeting? He shot me a glance, cold and sharp. Don't play coy, undermining me in front of my board. You're bored, he added bitterly, as if the word itself was poison. I wasn't undermining you, I said, fighting to keep my tone even. I was presenting data facts. It wasn't personal. Everything is personal, he snapped, especially reputation. And you shattered mine today. I wanted to say your reputation was never fragile enough to be shattered by me, but I bit it back. Outside, the drizzle thickened into rain. The wipers swished rhythmically, their sound an unsettling metronome to his anger. Do you know what the board saw today? He continued, his voice low but venomous. Not a competent executive, not my heir. They saw a child. My child. One who still believes in fairy tales and causes. Do you know how dangerous that is? Dangerous. He said it as if my vision of clean buildings and sustainable futures were a threat to the empire he'd built. My hands clenched in my lap. Dangerous is refusing to evolve. Dangerous is ignoring the market when it's shifting beneath you. The air in the car chilled. His grip on the wheel tightened further veins, standing out along his wrist. You think you know better than me? He asked quietly. That calm tone of his was worse than shouting. I built this empire while you were still playing with dolls. You don't even know what real failure feels like. You've been protected your entire life. Protected. I almost laughed. Protected by whom? By the man who stranded me at 16, who cut me off at 20. Lightning split the horizon, illuminating his profile, hard, unyielding, carved from something colder than stone. For the first time, I realized he didn't just want obedience. He wanted surrender. We drove on in silence for another 20 minutes. Then, without warning, he took an unfamiliar exit, steering us off the highway onto a narrow rural road. Fields stretched on either side, blurred by sheets of rain. My pulse quickened. This isn't the way to Westbrook, I said carefully. His eyes never left the road. Consider this, an alternate route. A lesson in humility. The knot in my chest tightened into dread. He slowed the car, suddenly pulling onto a gravel shoulder beside an empty stretch of road. No houses, no businesses, nothing but rain trees and the faint smell of wet earth. What are we doing here? I asked, though. I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. He shifted the gear and into park, the engine idling. Then he turned to face me fully for the first time since the meeting. His expression was calm, too calm. Give me your phone, he said. What, why? Your phone, Carol. Now. The weight in his voice left no room for argument. My hands trembled as I pulled it from my purse, passing it to him. He slid it into his jacket pocket. Your wallet, too. I froze. Father, your wallet, he repeated, his eyes glinting with something colder than rage. I reached slowly into my bag, pulling out my wallet. My pulse thundered in my ears as I placed it in his waiting hand. Then he leaned across me, opening the glove compartment. From it, he retrieved a small GPS device. You didn't really think you could hide from me, did you? He said softly, almost conversationally. Tracking devices, secret meetings with Janet and Thomas. Did you think I wouldn't know? The blood drained from my face. He'd been monitoring me, watching me. Every move I thought I'd made in secret wasn't secret at all. Get out, he said suddenly. I blinked at him, sure I'd misheard. What? You heard me. Get out of the car. The rain lashed against the windshield, a relentless drumbeat. My voice cracked, despite my effort. We're in the middle of nowhere. It's miles to town. Then you'll have plenty of time to reflect, he cut in. On loyalty, on respect, on knowing your place. My chest burned with disbelief, fury hurt. This is insane, even for you. His jaw clenched. Your mother would be ashamed of you. That hit harder than any storm could. My throat ached, but I forced my voice steady. If Mom were here, she'd be ashamed of you. For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished, replaced by stone. Out, he repeated. The rain hammered harder, the storm above, echoing the storm inside me. Slowly, my hand reached for the door handle. I thought I knew my father. I thought I understood his cruelty. But as I stepped out into the downpour, soaked in seconds, I realized I had never seen him this ruthless. And I knew with chilling clarity that this was only the beginning. The cold slammed into me the second I stepped out of the car. Sheets of rain pounded down, soaking me instantly, plastering my silk blouse to my skin. The wind whipped my hair against my face, stinging like lashes. Gravel crunched beneath my heels, water already pooling around them. I turned back toward the car, desperate for some sign of hesitation in my father. He sat rigidly in the driver's seat, eyes fixed ahead, jaw set. For a heartbeat, I thought he might relent, that he'd roll down the window, call me back in, admit this was too far. Instead, he leaned across the passenger seat, pulled the door closed, and drove off. The taillights glowed red through the curtain of rain, shrinking smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. Silence followed. Not true silence. The storm filled my ears, with the relentless drumming of water on asphalt, the hiss of wind through wet trees, but a silence of abandonment. A silence that screamed louder than his words ever had. You are nothing without me. I stood frozen water streaming down my face, unsure if the wetness on my cheeks was rain or tears. My hands trembled. My throat ached. For a long moment, all I could think was, he really left me. He actually did it. Instinct urged me to run after the car to beg to scream his name, but I stayed rooted to the spot. If I ran, if I begged, I would prove him right, that I was weak dependent, a child who needed saving. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, though the rain pressed them down. My blouse clung translucent now, and my tailored pants sagged heavy with water. My heels sank into the muddy shoulder. I looked down the road. Empty, both ways, miles of emptiness. One step, then another. My leather shoes squelched with each movement, blisters already forming from the wet friction. My body shivered with cold, but inside a strange clarity began to form. This wasn't the first time he had abandoned me. 16 at that ski resort washing dishes to pay for a bus home. 20 left penniless for months. Each time he called it a lesson. But those were small cuts compared to this wound. And yet I was still standing. The storm raged on. Lightning cracked across the horizon, illuminating the road in violent white. Thunder rolled seconds later, rattling the air in my chest. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I whispered aloud, if only to hear my own voice in the void. This will not break me. The words sounded small against the storm, but they steadied me. Minutes blurred, 10, maybe 15. My body numbed from the cold, my mind cycling through. Disbelief, anger, hurt. But somewhere buried beneath all of it was resolve. Then, faint at first, a new sound cut through the rain, the low rumble of an engine. My heart leapt and plummeted all at once, relief and fear twisted together. Who was it? A stranger? A threat? Or had Robert returned, ready to resume his twisted lesson? Headlights pierced the curtain of rain behind me, growing brighter. I turned, raising a trembling hand to shield my eyes. A dark pickup truck slowed as it neared its tires, hissing on the wet road. It pulled to a stop 20 feet ahead. The driver's door opened, and a tall figure stepped out. The storm silhouetted him, broad shoulders, squared, posture, alert. He moved toward me with calm, deliberate strides. Even through the rain, I recognized him instantly. Relief surged through me so fiercely, I nearly collapsed. "Alex," I breathed. He stopped a few feet away, his face shadowed by the storm, though his eyes sharp, unwavering, locked on mine. His voice deep and steady cut through the chaos. "Miss Davis," he said formally, as if we weren't standing alone in the middle of nowhere. "I believe you could use a ride." Something inside me cracked. A hysterical laugh bubbled up, half relief, half disbelief. You could say that I managed shivering violently. How did you even find me?" He reached into his jacket, shielding a small device with his palm from the rain. The glow of a screen flickered. A pulsing blue dot marked our position. "I placed a tracker on your father's car months ago," he explained matter-of-factly. "At your uncle's insistence, he suspected something like this might happen. Uncle James, even in death, still protecting me." My throat tightened. Alex shrugged off his dark jacket and placed it around my shoulders. The weight was immediate grounding. The faint scent of pine and leather clung to the fabric, cutting through the damp air. "Come on," he said, his tone softer now. "Let's get you warm." I let him guide me to the truck. My legs trembled more from exhaustion than fear now. Inside the cab was warm, the heater blasting. He handed me a towel from a duffel bag, then turned away discreetly as I pressed it to my dripping hair and face. "You're shaking," he observed. "Drink this." He passed me a bottle of water. I drank greedily, not realizing until then how parched I was. "Thank you," I whispered. The words felt too small for the enormity of what he'd just done. He only nodded eyes, scanning the rain-soaked road outside as though expecting Robert to return at any moment. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in my father's present: safety. And for the first time, I began to wonder if surviving my father's games wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time to fight back. The hum of the truck's engine and the steady blast of heat slowly thawed the chill in my bones. Rain hammered the roof above us, but inside, cocooned in leather seats, and the faint scent of pine, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My blouse clung miserably, my body still shivering despite Alex's jacket around my shoulders. He didn't speak at first. He kept his eyes on the road as he steered us back toward the highway. His jaw tight, the muscles in his forearms flexing as he gripped the wheel. I studied him in the dim glow of the dashboard, the angular lines of his face, the way his eyes scanned the mirrors, with the precision of someone who had lived his life on alert. Finally, I broke the silence. How long have you been following me tonight? His gaze flicked toward me, then back to the rain-streaked windshield. Since the board meeting ended. Your uncle asked me to keep a closer eye on you whenever your father seemed agitated, and he was livid today. The memory of Robert's glare in that glass-walled room made my stomach knot. Uncle James thought this could happen, that my father would actually leave me on the side of the road. Maybe not this exact scenario, Alex said evenly, but he worried Robert's lessons would escalate. James was very clear. Protect you from harm. Any kind of harm. I turned toward the window, the rain blurring the dark fields beyond. My uncle had always been gentle, his humor a rare antidote to the cold formality of our family. Knowing he'd arranged this protection in his final months, even as his heart was failing, sent a sharp ache through me. He'd seen what I hadn't wanted to see. You've been with me for 2 years, I said softly, and yet I know almost nothing about you. Alex's hands tightened briefly on the wheel before relaxing again. That was by design. The less you knew, the less your father could use against you if he found out. There it was again, that quiet acknowledgement that Robert wasn't just controlling. He was dangerous. But I pressed. Still, tell me something. Anything. Please. For a moment I thought he would refuse. Then he sighed, eyes fixed ahead. Former Army Ranger. 8 years. Tours in Afghanistan. When I came back stateside, I worked in private security. Your uncle found me through a friend. And your family, I asked gently. He hesitated, his jaw ticking once. Gone. Parents and sister killed in a car accident while I was overseas. 5 years ago. My throat tightened. The duffel bag in the back seat, the spare clothes, the towel. The clothes you gave me, I realized. They were hers, weren't they? His silence was answer enough. I'm sorry, I whispered. He nodded once, not looking at me. You learn to carry loss, or it carries you. For a while, the only sound was the rain. But something shifted between us in that silence and understanding, a thread tying our wounds together. When he spoke again, his tone was sharper, businesslike. Your father knew too much tonight. He found the tracker on your car. That means he's getting information from inside your circle. I turned toward him, startled. Inside from who? Walter Chen. His answer was immediate, certain. The board member. My mind replayed the meeting, Walter's pen tapping his unusual attentiveness during my presentation, his vote against Robert. But he seemed supportive today. Alex gave a short, humorless laugh. Supportive in public. Feeding your father information in private. I've suspected it for months. The betrayal stung, though I shouldn't have been surprised. Robert had always kept people loyal to him by fear or favors. Of course, he'd have eyes on me. Then what chance do I have? I murmured, the weight of it pressing down again. If he knows everything... Alex cut me off. Not everything. Not what your uncle left in motion. Not that I'm here. He's underestimated you, Carol. That's his mistake. I studied him. The stormlight flashed across his face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes. He wasn't saying this to comfort me. He believed it. The miles passed in silence after that, the rain slowly easing as we left the back roads behind. At last the truck pulled off into the underground garage of a small coastal hotel, discreet, unassuming, tucked away in a town where Davis Enterprises had no holdings. Alex parked and killed the engine. This place is off the grid. No connections to your father. We'll stay here tonight. We entered through a service entrance, avoiding the lobby cameras. He moved with a soldier's precision, checking corners, scanning reflections in windows. Every detail calculated. By the time we reached the suite upstairs, I was trembling again, not from cold, but from the realization of just how precarious my life had become. The room was spacious, neutral in its decor. White walls, pale wood, large windows overlooking a storm-lashed harbor. Under any other circumstances, it might have been serene. I changed into the dry clothes he'd given me, a gray sweatshirt, yoga pants, too long. At the hem. Hardly glamorous, but blessedly warm. When I emerged, Alex was on the phone, his voice low, controlled. He ended the call as soon as he saw me. Sarah Williams will be here in 20 minutes, he said. Who's Sarah Williams? I asked warily. Your uncle's attorney, and now yours. He left instructions for her, too. The room tilted slightly, as if the floor had shifted under me. My uncle hadn't just hired Alex. He'd built a safety net I hadn't even known existed. I sank onto the couch, overwhelmed. In the span of hours, my father had abandoned me. My uncle's secrets had begun to unravel, and a man I barely knew was suddenly the only person I could trust. Alex sat in the armchair across from me, posture relaxed, but eyes alert. He studied me for a long moment. What he did today wasn't just cruel, Carol, it was dangerous. Leaving you out there, no resources in that storm. If I hadn't found you. I cut him off, not wanting to hear the possibilities, but you did. Our eyes met, and for the first time I saw something beyond his professional mask. Anger. Not at me, at Robert, at what he had done. The knock at the door came then, sharp but measured. Alex Rose instantly checked the peephole, then opened it. A woman in her 40s entered, sharp suit, silver-streaked hair, eyes that assessed everything in a single glance. She carried a leather briefcase and the air of someone who never wasted time. "Miss Davis," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Williams. Your uncle asked me to find you if certain circumstances ever arose, and it seems they have." I took her hand, still trembling. "Please call me Carol." Sarah's gaze softened just slightly. "Then, Carol, let's begin." Sarah Williams set her briefcase on the small dining table, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. She removed a slim digital recorder, pressing a button that emitted a soft red glow. "For your protection," she explained. "We need a clear account of what happened today." I exchanged a glance with Alex, who gave a short nod. So for the next 20 minutes, I poured out everything: the boardroom, my father's public humiliation, the unexpected support from Janet and Thomas, and finally the drive into the storm. My words grew shaky when I described the moment he stripped me of my phone and wallet, when I realized he had been tracking me, when he ordered me into the rain. Sarah listened with the practiced patience of someone who had heard confessions before, though her eyes darkened as I spoke. When I finished, she clicked the recorder off and folded her hands. "What your father did today constitutes reckless endangerment," she said firmly. "At minimum, potentially criminal negligence." Hearing the words out loud made my stomach turn. I had always framed his punishments as cruel but survivable lessons. To hear them named as crimes was something else entirely. She opened her briefcase again and withdrew a set of blue-bound documents. "Your Uncle James anticipated this. He created a contingency plan to activate if Robert crossed certain lines. Carol, it's time you knew the truth about your inheritance." "My inheritance," I repeated, frowning. "I don't have one yet. Everything belongs to my father." "Not everything," Sarah corrected, sliding the documents across the table. "Your mother, Elizabeth Davis, had her own assets. Substantial ones. Assets that should have transferred to you immediately upon her death." My breath caught, but my father told me everything was jointly held, that there was nothing separate. Sarah's expression hardened. That was a lie. According to these records, Elizabeth maintained accounts and investments in her maiden name, Montgomery, valued at approximately $28 million. I stared at her, my pulse roaring in my ears. $28 million. Alex shifted in his chair, his gaze flicking to me, then to Sarah. "Yes," she said simply. "And those assets were left entirely to you in her will. Your father, as executor of her estate, should have transferred them. Instead, he concealed their existence and misappropriated the funds. That is fraud. Conversion of assets. Breach of trust." I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead. All those years of thinking I was financially dependent on him. All those times he cut me off, forced me to scrape by on savings, punished me with money I thought was his. He had been using mine. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah pulled out her laptop, her fingers quick over the keys. She turned the screen toward me, displaying a series of transactions. "Since the day your mother died. He began siphoning funds within weeks. These transfers moved money from accounts labeled EC Trust Fund, Elizabeth Davis's trust, into various corporate and personal holdings." The letters on the screen blurred as my eyes filled. EC, my mother. My mother had left me independent safety, a lifeline, and he had stolen it. "It wasn't about the money," Sarah said gently. "It was about control. By keeping you financially dependent, he kept you under his thumb." I thought of every boardroom lecture, every time he reminded me I owed him everything. It hadn't been true, not once. "And that isn't all," Sarah continued, her tone sharpening. She withdrew another folder, this one heavier, thicker. "Your Uncle James held 8% of Davis Enterprises as a minority shareholder. Upon his death, those shares were transferred to you." "That can't be," I said, shaking my head. "I never received them. I would have known." "You didn't know," Sarah said evenly, "because your father concealed it just as he concealed your mother's assets. And when combined with the 20% of company shares your mother held also left to you, your ownership stake totals 51%. The words landed like thunder. 51%. Alex leaned forward, his voice steady but urgent. You're the majority shareholder, Carol. Legally, you control Davis Enterprises. I felt the room tilt the walls, pressing in. My whole life, I had been the subordinate, the afterthought, the dutiful daughter, desperate for scraps of respect. And all along I had held the power my father guarded so jealously. I don't understand, I whispered. Why didn't he just tell me? Why? Why hide it? Sarah's gaze was unflinching. Because if you knew, you wouldn't need him. And Robert Davis cannot tolerate being unnecessary. He would rather rob his own daughter than relinquish control. My chest constricted, betrayal layered over betrayal, each revelation cutting deeper than the last. As if on cue, the phone Alex had given me vibrated on the table. The caller ID flashed father. Sarah met my eyes. Answer it. But don't reveal what you know. Let him think you're still vulnerable. I swallowed hard and pressed speaker. Carol! My father's voice came through, laced with irritation, thinly veiled as concern. Where are you? I expected you to call hours ago. My mouth went dry. Sarah gestured for me to play along. I would have called sooner, I said, forcing my voice small contrite. But I didn't have a phone. You took it, remember? Don't be dramatic, he scoffed. You could have borrowed one from anyone. Have you learned your lesson? I hesitated. My stomach churned. Then, steadying my voice, I lied. Yes, father. I was wrong. It won't happen again. His exhale was audible, self-satisfied. Good. Where are you now? I'll send a car. A friend picked me up, I said vaguely. I can come home tonight if you want. Yes, that would be best, he replied. We need to discuss your future role at the company. Something less visible, perhaps. More appropriate for your temperament. My nails dug into my palm beneath the table. More appropriate. Demotion dressed as paternal concern. I'll be there soon, I said, cutting the call before my anger betrayed me. The silence after his voice vanished was thick. Well done, Sarah said quietly. Now we begin. Tonight you return home, act contrite, let him think he's won. Meanwhile, we gather evidence. Tomorrow we move. Her words steadied me. For the first time, I wasn't cornered. I had proof. Allies. A plan. And a father who had no idea his daughter was about to become his greatest threat. The Davis mansion glowed against the night like a fortress, every window lit, every column casting long shadows across the rain-soaked driveway. It should have felt like home. Instead, as I walked up the steps, it felt like the mouth of a beast. Alex had dropped me off 2 blocks away, his eyes sharp as he reminded me of the plan. Keep your head down. Don't challenge him. The pendant will record everything. I'll be close. The pendant hung cool against my collarbone, disguised as a delicate silver chain. Only I knew its secret. Only I felt the small weight of the recorder against my skin. The heavy front door opened with the familiar creak, and I stepped inside. The scent of polish and old wood enveloped me. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the foyer, every second a drumbeat in my chest. My father was waiting in the living room, glass of scotch in hand, reading glasses perched on his nose as he leafed through documents. He looked up as I entered, and for a brief second a smile curved his lips, not warmth, but triumph. Ah, Carol, he said smoothly. I trust your little adventure was educational. I lowered my gaze, shoulders slumped, the picture of chastened submission. Yes, father, it was. He studied me for a long moment, then motioned for me to follow. Come. Mrs. Parker left dinner for us. We moved into the dining room, a cavernous space dominated by the long mahogany table. 2 places were set, one at either end. The physical distance mirrored the emotional gulf between us. I sat where he indicated, my hands folded in my lap, my eyes cast downward. The meal was quiet at first, the clink of silverware against china filling the void. My appetite was gone, but I forced myself to lift bites of food, careful not to draw suspicion. Finally, he broke the silence. I've been reflecting. Perhaps I have been too generous with your responsibilities at the company. I looked up briefly, only to lower my eyes again. I'm sorry, Father. I didn't mean to embarrass you. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his gaze sharp. Embarrassment is too soft a word. You undermined me, but tonight proves you've learned. Defiance does not suit you. Inside, rage flared. Defiance doesn't suit me, or it terrifies you. Outwardly. I nodded meekly. You're right. He leaned back, satisfied. Tomorrow I'll announce your transfer to community relations. Less demanding, more appropriate for your temperament. A supportive role rather than a leadership one. Each word was a dagger, a demotion disguised as mercy. I forced my voice steady. Whatever you think is best, Father. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Good girl. You know these lessons may seem harsh now, but one day you'll thank me. The world is cruel, Carol. I only want to prepare you. I felt the pendant against my chest, recording every syllable, every calculated threat, dressed as fatherly wisdom. Mrs. Parker, our housekeeper, of 20 years, entered briefly to clear plates. She glanced at me, just a flicker, her brows knitting in concern before lowering her gaze. She had seen too much over the years, yet remained silent, bound by loyalty or fear. For the first time, I wondered if she, too, might become an ally. When dessert was finished, my father set down his fork and dabbed his lips with a linen napkin. I believe we understand each other now. Tomorrow is a new beginning. I swallowed hard and forced a small smile. Yes, Father. I rose from my chair and walked the long distance to where he sat. My heart hammered, my hands shook, but I leaned down and kissed his cheek, something I hadn't done in years. He stiffened in surprise, then relaxed his smile, widening. He believed it. He thought he had won. Good night, Father, I murmured. Sleep well, Carol, he replied. His tone almost paternal now, as though he hadn't abandoned me in a storm hours earlier. I climbed the sweeping staircase to my room, my every movement deliberate, my shoulders still slumped. But once inside, I locked the door, leaned against it, and exhaled shakily. The mask slipped away, my back straightened, my eyes hardened. I pulled out the secure phone Alex had given me and typed a single message inside. Recording. Proceed. Within seconds, his reply came, Good. Stay quiet. Tomorrow we strike. I set the phone down and went to the window. From here I could see the long driveway, the gates that had always felt like prison bars more than protection. Somewhere beyond those gates, Alex was watching. I touched the pendant, its cool weight against my skin. For years I'd thought my father's control was unbreakable, his dominance absolute. But tonight, for the first time, the balance had shifted. He believed I was broken. He had no idea I was recording every word that would dismantle him. As I slipped into bed, exhaustion finally overtaking me, I whispered to the darkness, This is the last lesson you'll ever teach me. The house settled into silence around me. But beneath that silence, a storm was building, not of weather, but of truth. And tomorrow it would break. Morning broke with deceptive calm sunlight spilling across the Boston skyline, as if the storm had never happened. But I felt the storm inside me, still steady sharp, a current I could not suppress. Today, Robert Davis would face the truth he had buried for years. I dressed carefully, a simple black sheath dress, elegant but understated, projecting composure and quiet authority. Not the daughter returning to apologize, but the woman prepared to claim her place. As I fastened the silver pendant around my neck, I touched it briefly, feeling the weight of everything it had captured the night before. At precisely 8:15, my father left the house in his black Mercedes, heading for the company headquarters. He believed he was in control, ready to announce my demotion, ready to reduce me once again to the obedient daughter. He had no idea I was about to dismantle the empire of lies he had built. 30 minutes later, Alex drove me to Davis Enterprises. In the underground garage, Sarah Williams waited with Janet Pierce and Thomas Blackwell. The tension among them was palpable, their faces set with grim determination. Sarah handed me a leather portfolio. The documents are in order. The recordings are backed up. Once you speak, don't stop. The board needs to hear it all at once. Janet gave me a steadying squeeze on the arm. We're with you. Thomas nodded, his voice low but resolute. Your mother would be proud. I inhaled deeply, steadying the tremor in my chest. Let's go. We timed our arrival perfectly. 15 minutes into my father's executive committee meeting. Alex took position outside the door, a silent sentinel. Sarah, Janet, Thomas, and I entered without knocking. Inside, Robert stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, addressing the committee with his usual command. His voice faltered when he saw us. Anger flared in his eyes, but he quickly masked it. What is the meaning of this interruption, he demanded. His gaze zeroed in on me, sharp as a blade. Carol, this meeting is for executives. Wait in your office until I summon you. I met his gaze squarely. My voice, steady and clear, carried across the room. Actually, Father, this meeting concerns you directly. You might want to sit down. For perhaps the first time in his life, Robert Davis was momentarily speechless. I apologized for the interruption. I continued, turning to the others. But serious matters have come to light that affect the leadership and future of Davis Enterprises. This is absurd, Robert snapped, his voice rising. Security will escort you out if necessary. Thomas Blackwell stepped forward, his gravitas commanding the room. As senior board member, I've authorized this intervention, Robert. Sit down. The air thickened with tension. Robert's eyes darted across the faces of the committee. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered himself into his chair, though his fists remained clenched. I opened the portfolio and withdrew the first set of documents. Sarah and Janet distributed them down the table. My voice never wavered. These papers detail the misappropriation of assets left to me by my mother, Elizabeth Davis. Over the past 5 years, Robert Davis has diverted approximately $28 million into accounts he controlled, funds that legally belong to me. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. My father's face drained of color. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "Carol is confused about estate management. These transfers were standard." Janet's voice rang out crisp with authority. "I reviewed these transactions personally. They are not standard. They are fraud." Robert surged to his feet, his voice booming. "This meeting is over. I will not be ambushed in my own company by my ungrateful daughter." I raised my voice, cutting through his fury. "Your company, father." That brings me to the second issue. Sarah stepped forward, producing another set of documents. 2 years ago, Robert Davis concealed that Carol inherited her Uncle James's 8% of company shares, along with Elizabeth Davis's 20%. Combined, she controls 51% of Davis Enterprises. Legally, Carol Davis is the majority shareholder. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Robert's face contorted with rage. Lies, forged documents. I reached up, unclasped the silver pendant, and set it on the table. With one press of a button, the room filled with his voice, clear, undeniable. "Give me your phone. Your wallet, too. A little discomfort builds character. When you're ready to apologize and remember your place, you can call me if you can find a phone." The boardroom froze. His words, cruel and calculated, echoed in the air like a verdict. My father's face twisted. He lunged toward me, eyes blazing, fists clenched. But Alex was there instantly, stepping between us, his presence calm but immovable. "That's enough, Mr. Davis." "Who the hell are you?" Robert roared. "Alexander Mercer," he said evenly. "Private security, hired by James Montgomery to protect his niece from you." Recognition flashed in Robert's eyes, followed by fury. You've been spying on me." "Documenting you," Alex corrected. "Every threat, every manipulation, every crime." "This is absurd." Robert turned to the committee, desperate. "She is my daughter. I have every right. She is 27 years old." Sarah cut in her voice, razor sharp. "Abandoning her in a storm without resources isn't discipline. It's criminal." The committee members shifted uncomfortably, their eyes filled with something Robert hadn't seen in years, doubt. Thomas cleared his throat. "Robert, it would be best if you step out. Janet, please call an emergency board meeting for noon today." My father's gaze snapped back to me, seething. "You can't do this. I built this company. It's mine. 51% of it is mine," I said quietly but firmly. "And I'm calling for a vote on your leadership." For a heartbeat, I thought he might strike me, even with Alex standing inches away. But then the fight seemed to drain from him, replaced by cold calculation. He straightened his tie, his voice low and venomous. "Fine, have your meeting. But this isn't over, Carol." He stalked out the door, slamming behind him. The silence that followed was immense. My hands trembled, but I held my chin high. Janet placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did well. Very well." Thomas nodded. "Your mother was right. You have steel in your spine." Alex met my eyes. In his steady gaze, I saw something I hadn't felt in years possibility. Robert Davis believed he had taught me lessons of obedience and humility. Today, I had taught him one of my own. Never underestimate the daughter you tried to break. The emergency board meeting convened at noon. The atmosphere was heavy, the air electric with unease. Documents lay scattered across the long table. Sarah's folders. Janet's spreadsheets, the damning recordings replayed in hushed disbelief. When the final vote was cast, it was unanimous. Robert Davis suspended as CEO, pending a full investigation into the misappropriation of funds. His name, once spoken in reverence within these walls, now carried only tension and unease. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands folded in front of me, outwardly composed, inwardly shaking. I had won, or at least I had survived the first battle, but victory tasted nothing like I imagined. From the window of the 30th floor, I watched as my father was escorted out of the building. His posture was rigid, his jaw clenched, his stride clipped with fury. Even from above, I could see the fire still burning in him. Robert Davis was not a man who accepted defeat. As his car pulled away from the curb, a strange emptiness washed over me. For years, I had fantasized about this moment, about breaking free, about seeing him stripped of power. I thought I would feel elation, vindication. Instead, all I felt was hollow. because beneath the ruthless tyrant, he was still my father, and watching him fall was like watching a part of myself unravel. When the room cleared, I stayed behind with Sarah, Janet, and Alex. Sarah snapped her briefcase shut, her voice measured. Phase 2 is complete. Now we prepare for the legal proceedings. He will fight with everything he has. Be ready. Janet touched my arm gently. You were brilliant. Don't doubt that. But brace yourself. Robert will not go quietly. Thomas, before leaving, paused by my chair. His weathered hand rested briefly on my shoulder. Steel spine, he repeated softly. Remember that. Then he was gone. When the door closed behind them, silence fell. Alex stood near the window, arms crossed, watching me with quiet vigilance. I exhaled shakily. Why don't I feel triumphant? Why do I just feel broken? He stepped closer, his voice low, steady. Because it's not just business. It's blood. When you fight, family victory always feels like loss. Tears stung my eyes. I blinked them back. I thought this was what I wanted. For him to finally see me, to finally stop controlling me. And now, Alex's gaze softened, a rare flicker of warmth breaking through his professional mask. He taught you fear, but today you taught him something else, that you're not afraid anymore. That's not nothing, Carol. That's everything. The weight of his words settled over me, grounding me. That evening, I returned to the mansion. The house was too quiet, the absence of his presence echoing through the halls. Every room felt colder, emptier. Mrs. Parker approached timidly in the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron. I heard she said softly, about the board meeting. My chest tightened. And what do you think? She studied me for a long moment, then gave a small nod. I think your mother would be proud. And I think it's about time. Her words nearly broke me. In the days that followed, the fallout rippled outward. Some executives resigned in protest, their loyalty to Robert too deep to sever. Others shifted allegiance quickly, eager to align with the new majority shareholder. The company's foundations quaked, but they did not crumble. Meanwhile, Robert fought back. Lawsuits arrived within 48 hours. Thick stacks of paper filled with accusations meant to stall and intimidate. His attorneys called me incompetent, reckless, unfit to lead. Sarah responded with calm precision, countering every motion, every desperate swing. He's throwing punches in the dark, she told me. But the evidence is too strong. He's buying time, nothing more. Still, I couldn't shake the fear. Each morning, I half expected to find him on the front steps, ready to drag me back under his control. Each night, I replayed the storm in my mind, the sound of his voice when he abandoned me. You need to remember your place. In those moments, Alex's presence kept me anchored. He was always nearby, not hovering, not overbearing, just there, a quiet constant. He drove me to the office, checked entrances and exits, scanned rooms before I entered. He never said it aloud, but I knew he was preparing for Robert to strike in ways that went beyond lawsuits. One evening, as we left headquarters, under the cover of dusk, I asked, "Do you think he'll ever stop?" Alex's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Men like Robert don't stop. They adapt. When they lose control one way, they seek it another. The thought chilled me, but his presence steadied me. At home, I found myself confiding in him more and more. Small things, at first. Memories of my mother, of childhood summers at Cape Cod, of the way my father used to surprise me with ice cream before everything hardened between us. Then deeper things, my doubts, my guilt, my fear of becoming like Robert. One night, sitting across from him in the quiet of the study, I whispered, "What if I'm no better than him? What if I've inherited his need to control, to dominate?" Alex's gaze was unwavering. "You question yourself. He never did. That alone makes you different." His words sank deep, lighting a fragile hope inside me. But hope was fleeting. Within weeks, anonymous articles began to appear in business journals, whispers of scandal, rumors about my competence, suggestions that I had seduced board members to gain support. The tone was unmistakable, Robert's hand at work. Sarah warned me. This is phase 3 of his playbook character assassination. He can't win in court, so he'll try to destroy you in the court of public opinion. I felt the walls closing in again, the old familiar weight of his shadow pressing down. But this time, I wasn't alone. Alex stood in the doorway of my office that night, his voice steady. "He wants you scared. Don't give him what he wants." I lifted my eyes to meet his. Then what do I give him? He stepped closer, his presence grounding. Nothing. Silence. And you give yourself the one thing he can't take back. "What's that?" I whispered. "Your freedom." The word lingered in the air like a promise. For the first time, I believed it might be possible. 6 months had passed since the day I walked into the boardroom and shattered the illusion of Robert Davis's untouchable reign. 6 months since I heard his own words condemn him, and 6 months since I first felt the weight of freedom, heavy, exhilarating, terrifying. The view from the 30th floor hadn't changed. Boston Harbor glittering under the sunships, gliding across its surface like brushstrokes on canvas. But everything inside these walls was different. The office once belonged to my father. Dark wood, heavy curtains, walls lined with awards and photographs with governors and senators. It had been a shrine to power. Now it was mine. The curtains were gone, replaced by wide-open blinds. The heavy desk had been exchanged for a sleek glass one. On the walls hung renderings of our newest Davis Green projects, shimmering, eco-friendly office towers, medical facilities with living green walls, schools that produced more energy than they consumed. I had made my mark. The Davis Green Initiative had become our fastest-growing division, with 3 major projects already underway and a waiting list of clients. Investors who once hesitated now clamored to attach their names to the new future. Even our rivals in the industry acknowledged that Davis Enterprises had reinvented itself. And yet, despite the triumph, the cost gnawed at me. Longtime executives loyal to Robert had resigned. Some spoke of betrayal. Others whispered of weakness, that I had destroyed the company's foundation. At night, their voices sometimes echoed in my dreams, mingling with my father's accusations. Power, I was learning, was not a crown. It was a burden, a constant test of endurance. And in my quieter moments, I wondered if I had simply become another version of him, controlling, unyielding, isolated at the top. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Alex stepped inside, his presence steady as always. His suit was neatly pressed, but his tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He had long since shifted from bodyguard to something else advisor. Anchor, the silent presence who knew when I needed protection and when I needed truth. "Your 2 o'clock is here," he said. I nodded, setting aside the quarterly reports. "Send them in." The door opened again, and for the first time in half a year, my father walked into my office. He looked smaller, his hair grayer, his frame leaner, his posture less commanding. The manic energy that had once radiated from him like a furnace was subdued, banked into embers. He wore an expensive suit, but it didn't sit on him with the same effortless authority. "Carol," he said stiffly. "Father," I replied, my voice calm, controlled. "Thank you for coming." Alex lingered for a moment, then glanced at me. I gave a subtle nod, and he left us, though I knew he would not stray far. The silence stretched. Finally, my father glanced around the office, his eyes catching on the Prescott painting, a landscape my mother had loved. It was the only piece of his old office I had kept. "The company looks good," he said at last, his tone carefully neutral. "The green division exceeded projections." I inclined my head. "Yes. Your suggestion to focus on medical facilities was a strong one. It helped." He looked at me sharply, as if surprised I would acknowledge it. His voice softened, just slightly. "I didn't think you'd keep that painting." "Mom loved it," I said simply. Another silence, less brittle this time. He shifted, cleared his throat. "Why did you ask me here, Carol? After everything?" I leaned forward, folding my hands on the desk. "Because it's time we talked. Not through lawyers, not through court filings, just us." His jaw flexed. "What's done is done. Dragging it out won't help." "No," I said firmly. "We need to address it, or we'll never move forward. I need to understand why. Why you did all of it, the control, the manipulation, hiding my inheritance, leaving me on that road." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him. "After your mother died, I was lost," he admitted, his voice rough. "Elizabeth was always the bridge between us. She knew how to reach you. I didn't. I only knew how to prepare you for the world. And the world is cruel. I thought if I was harsher than the world, you'd survive it." A bitter laugh slipped from me. "By breaking me down yourself, by becoming the cruelty you claimed to protect me from." He winced, but didn't look away. I told myself it was strength, that if you hated me, at least you'd be unbreakable. And my inheritance I pressed. The company shares, that was strength too. He lowered his eyes. That was fear. After Elizabeth died, I was terrified of losing control of you, of the company, of everything. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd tell you when you were ready. "When would that have been?" I asked, my voice sharp. "When I was broken enough not to use it." He had no answer. The silence was answer enough. Finally, he whispered, "I never meant to hurt you that day in the rain. I thought you'd walk it off. that it would humble you. No, Father, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It wasn't humility you wanted, it was obedience. But that day you didn't break me. You freed me. His eyes met mine then, and for the first time in my life, I saw something unfamiliar there, vulnerability. I've been seeing someone, he said abruptly. I frowned. Someone? A therapist, he admitted the word, sounding foreign in his mouth. Dr. Morrison. She specializes in controlling behavior, emotional abuse. He hesitated, then added, she's helping me see why I became the man I did. Patterns I learned from my own father. It doesn't excuse anything, but maybe it explains it. I sat back stunned. Robert Davis, the man who sneered at weakness, the man who dismissed therapy as indulgence, sitting here admitting he was in therapy. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. He swallowed hard. What happens now? I rose, walked to the window, the city spread beneath me. For a moment, I let the silence settle. Then I turned back. I can't forget what happened, I said honestly. The trust between us is broken, maybe beyond repair, but we can try to build something new with boundaries, with respect, if you're willing to do the work. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. I'd like that. I returned to my desk, slid a folder across to him. These are the terms. You may return as a consultant. Focus on areas where your expertise matters, but the board remains intact. I retain operational control. He accepted the folder without opening it. For once, he didn't argue. He only nodded. That sounds fair. He rose to leave, pausing at the door. He glanced around the office one last time, then back at me. You've done well, Carol. Better than I would have. It was perhaps the highest compliment he was capable of giving. When the door closed behind him, Alex re-entered, quietly studying me. You okay? I nodded, surprised to find that I was. I don't forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I understand him. And that's enough for now. Alex gave a small nod. Understanding doesn't mean letting him back in. No, I agreed, my gaze drifting back to the harbor. It means I can finally move forward without carrying all that anger. And that feels like freedom. The ballroom was filled with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the rustle of silk gowns and tailored suits. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in warm light, reflecting off the harbor beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Tonight was the inaugural gala for the Montgomery Foundation, named after my late uncle, the man who even in death had protected me more fiercely than anyone alive. I stood near the stage, my hands wrapped around a glass of water I hadn't touched. My heart beat faster than it had in any boardroom, any confrontation. Facing shareholders was one thing. Tonight was different. Tonight I would tell my story not as an executive, but as a survivor. Alex lingered at the edge of the crowd, his dark suit blending seamlessly with the staff. Though his presence was unmistakable to me, his gaze found mine steady grounding. A silent reminder, you're not alone anymore. The MC introduced me, and polite applause rippled through the hall. I walked onto the stage, my heels clicking against polished wood, the sound echoing in the hushed room. At the podium, I adjusted the microphone, my fingers trembling. For a moment, I stared out at the sea of faces, donors, journalists, fellow executives, strangers, who had come to witness the birth of something new. And then among them, I saw him, my father. He sat near the back, not in a tuxedo, but in a simple dark suit, no scotch in hand, no entourage flanking him, just Robert Davis, older, grayer, diminished, but here. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and then I began. Good evening, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Thank you for being here tonight. This foundation is named for my uncle James Montgomery. He believed in protecting those who couldn't always protect themselves. He believed that strength wasn't about dominance, but about compassion. And he believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. A lump rose in my throat, but I pressed on. 6 months ago, I stood in a boardroom and confronted a truth I had been avoiding for years, that control, even when disguised as love, is still control, that silence when faced with abuse is still surrender, and that freedom is not given, it is claimed. The room was silent, the kind of silence that means every word is being absorbed. I grew up in privilege, a mansion by the ocean, private schools, a name that opened doors. To the outside world, it looked perfect. But perfection is often the mask that hides the cracks. Behind those doors, I lived under the weight of control so heavy it nearly broke me. I was told what to study, who to befriend, even what to dream. Every mistake was a lesson, every defiance a punishment. And the harshest lessons weren't about money or business. They were about obedience. My hands tightened on the podium. One night in a storm, I was abandoned miles from home with nothing. No phone, no money, no shelter. It was meant to break me, but instead it freed me. Because that night in the rain, I realized something. If I could survive the cruelty of someone who was supposed to protect me, then I could survive anything. A ripple of emotions stirred in the crowd. Some shifted uncomfortably, others leaned forward, eyes shining. I let a pause stretch before I continued. This foundation will provide resources for those trapped in cycles of control and abuse, financial support, legal aid, safe housing counseling. Because no one should have to choose between obedience and survival, and no one should feel alone in their fight for freedom. Applause swelled, but I held up a hand, silencing it gently. This isn't just about my story. It's about all of us, about the invisible battles people fight every day behind closed doors, and about the power that comes from standing up and saying no more. My gaze drifted once more to the back of the room to my father. He hadn't moved. His expression was unreadable, but his presence was undeniable. I didn't know if he was proud, ashamed, or simply curious. Maybe he didn't know either. I closed with the words I had carried with me since that night. Sometimes the greatest strength emerges from our most vulnerable moments. Sometimes standing in the rain washes away everything false and leaves only the truth of who we really are. Tonight I stand here not as a victim, not even as a daughter, but as someone free. And my hope is that this foundation will help others find that same freedom. The applause was thunderous this time, rising like a wave that broke over me, soaking me in something I hadn't felt in years: acceptance. Afterward, as donors mingled and the orchestra swelled with music, Alex found me near the balcony. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of salt and the faint sound of waves against the harbor. "You did it," he said simply. I exhaled, finally allowing myself a small smile. I almost didn't. "You almost didn't survive that night in the rain either," he reminded me. "But you did, and now look where you are." I looked out over the water, the city lights shimmering against the dark. "Do you think you'll ever change?" I asked quietly. Alex followed my gaze. "I don't know, but whether he does or not, it doesn't define you anymore." I nodded, the truth of it settling into my bones. As the night wound down, I caught one last glimpse of my father leaving the ballroom. He didn't approach me. He didn't speak. He simply paused at the doorway, looking back once. His eyes met mine across the room, a flicker of something I couldn't name, and then he was gone. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for his approval, his forgiveness, or his control. I had my own. Later, when the guests had gone and the lights dimmed, I stood alone on the balcony. The harbor stretched before me, endless, alive, untamed. My mother's voice echoed in my memory words she had once whispered when I was small. "You are stronger than you know." For years I had doubted it, but now, as the wind lifted my hair and the night wrapped around me, I believed it. Because true power isn't in control, it isn't in fear, it isn't even in victory. It's in freedom, and at last I was free.